I'm Jim Check. You're watching Kelowna Now. With me on the phone, Ian Burns. We've had some technical difficulties this morning, so we had a little bit slower start, but we're working our way through it. How you doing there, Ian?
I'm all right, mate. And I don't think we should feel too bad about technical difficulties. Happened yesterday at the inauguration, didn't it?
There
So
you
we're
go.
in good
Yeah,
company.
yeah. But Carrie seemed to sing a lot better than we'll ever sing. I think, right?
Speak for yourself, mate.
There you go. Canadian Medical Association says 37% of Canadians are forced to seek health advice online due to the lack of doctors. That's a lot of Canadians.
Yeah, well, it's actually quite a funny. It's from the Canadian Medical Association, and they've commissioned this with an obvious slant. They want to talk about what they refer to as health misinformation, and they want to kind of lecture the social media companies and try and get them to clean up house a bit more. But the real story and what the press have taken from it is that there are, potentially, well, there are millions of people, if this is accurate, who
Well,
are out there Googling, symptoms because they don't have a doctor and they don't think they're going to be able to see one.
Well, 37% would put those millions and millions, not just a million, but lots of millions. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the CMA says here, I mean, this data is available elsewhere, but they say there's about 6.5 million people in Canada that don't have a doctor.
Yeah.
And obviously, you're then told, well, just go to a walk-in, go to ER or whatever. But, as is highlighted every other day in news stories, that can sometimes be 12 or 16 or more hours waiting to see someone.
Even to the point where that person died in the Winnipeg waiting room.
Yeah, and then the other one with that girl tragically losing her hands and feet
Yeah.
because she had sepsis. She developed sepsis while in the waiting room.
And now they finally decided that they're going to look at immigration, after, like stressed housing, stressed healthcare. Now they've decided that, if you keep increasing the supply, maybe it really hurts, um, or the demand by increasing the supply of people here, that it hurts the ability to deliver service to Canadians.
Yeah, and in every single aspect of life. I mean, infrastructure, medicine, schools, everywhere.
Yeah, and then sorry, there's some commotion out in the hallway to top it off here. um, People yelling in the hallways. Nice. You gotta love that.
So
The
now it's
Liberal
like,
leadership
now we're doing
hopefuls
a tribute to Christia Freeland, aren't we? On her
the
leadership
Liberal
announcement.
leadership hopefuls distance themselves from carbon pricing. Yeah, I watched that interview. We were going to play that actually, but we had like those technical difficulties have caused some issues there. But she's saying Canadians don't want it now, and that she just went along to get along. When you're on a team, like she's trying to distance herself actually from the carbon pricing. After stating it this close to 50 times that how much she supported the carbon pricing.
Yeah, well, we had this conversation, didn't we, about her options, which I saw them broadly speaking. Her options as being either she could say she was kind of oppressed by the master who told her to do things she didn't want, or she, the alternative being that she actually agreed with a lot of what was done, but maybe didn't do it the way she wanted it to be done. And it seems like she's going to go for the former. She's going to go for the kind of like I was squashed. I had my liberty taken from me by Justin Trudeau.
The
But I
self,
mean, that's not. I
this,
don't think that's going to go down particularly well because obviously she had the opportunity to resign literally whenever she wanted
no,
to. That was
no.
always her choice.
Yeah, so she's saying she was bullied basically by the self-described feminist, who also had the opportunity to promote her as the PM. And she, like the role she played was not just finance minister. She was the second in command. She was the deputy prime minister. So if you take on that role and responsibility, you have a responsibility to Canadians. You don't have a responsibility to Justin Trudeau. You have a responsibility to Canadians. The Canadians voted for you, not Justin Trudeau. This going along to get along, that, in my mind, disqualifies her even as a contender.
Well, uh, if she's not being honest about it, I guess, yeah, that would be disqualification. Yeah, but I mean, it's a tricky one because there is collective responsibility. That is how these governments work. Really, every government in the world, except for like nutcase dictatorships, they work based on this idea that there is a leader and there are certain things that you just kind of have to just go along with for the sake of unity, for the sake of governing. Otherwise, it would be chaotic. But this is a bit different because this is a situation where she's been at the heart of all of these policies, many of them now unpopular, and now she's saying, well, maybe I didn't actually like them very much. That's kind of, I think that's a little bit different. That's not
Yeah.
quite, you can't quite hide under collective responsibility with that kind of, when you're that senior.
Yeah, or like, is she just saying what people want to hear because she needs a vote right now? I mean, it doesn't look good on the Liberals at all, right? Like, most of their policies are. I mean, that's why they're like way down in the polls in their parties, at the precipice of being like losing party status.
Yeah, well, I think it represents, it represents a defeat for the Liberal Party on a lot of policies. The carbon tax was notably, but it's not just that. It's effectively they diverged from the Canadian public, but now that we're going into an election, they have to make sure that they're as close to the Canadian public as they can get. Otherwise, nobody's going to vote for them. So, yeah, it's a tricky one to pull off, and that's why a lot of political observers don't really give them much chance in the next election.
And then Environment Minister Stephen Jabot, again, reaching out and slamming Donald Trump, saying it's deplorable that he pulled out of the Paris Accord. But here they are, their own party is pulling out of the carbon tax. And it's time to find a mirror.
It's also a blast from the past, isn't it? That word, deplorable. It's good old word used by Hillary Clinton.
He pulled that out. Yeah. Is this?
I think he probably used that intentionally because that's kind of how sad political people are. But it's quite a funny one.
Is this how the Liberals are negotiating with Donald Trump, pulling out all those words again?
Yeah, well, it's not something that he's. I mean, frankly, let's be honest, it's not something that he's likely to even hear about or care about. But I mean, if he was very high up in the negotiations with the US, then it would obviously not be advisable to use that kind of language.
I love all these images they try to use to make themselves look powerful. The one that Jolie that they keep trotting out there too, with the the aperture set there so that the background's all the way and he looks so powerful. He looks like Bill Gates to me in this photo, not some powerful image.
He looks he looks like that emoji that Elon Musk used to insult Bill Gates.
This policy, their pillar, which is Mark Carney's behind and has actually made a living off of this with his Net Zero Alliance and advising all these people on it. This is their biggest failure as a policy, and it's their number one thing, and it's the one that's been crippling Canadians with a compounding carbon tax that has been devastating to our economy.
Well, I think it goes even deeper than that with the carbon tax because we talked about this. I think it was yesterday, wasn't it? Where we were talking about like internationalism versus nationalism. I think they always advertised that, and a lot of their other climate policies as being essentially internationalist. It was about the whole world. It was about Canada doing its part, and even going beyond, its proportionate part, and kind of doing even more to like serve as a lesson to other countries, to kind of do even more than we need to do. So I think on that level, it's upset quite a lot of people. But I think also it's kind of the perception that they've been deceptive about the carbon tax and trying to claim, well, for one thing, that it isn't a tax when it obviously is. Try to give it special names, and then try to say that it's completely neutral. Nobody loses money. No money's wasted. It's just, all it does is punishes people that want to drive 10 pickup trucks to work every day, something like that. I think a lot of people were kind of insulted by that and that tone because it was obviously inadequate and it didn't work, I think, for at least a majority of people.
Trudeau's vision of a post-nationalist state, and now he's screaming for Team Canada, right?
Well, and also, if you listen to him this morning, it was all about minerals. It was all about resources. It was all about, the sort of resource sector. And a lot of people in Canada are under the impression that he, was never really a friend of that sector. So that's also another one of those, isn't it?
We'll get back to that in a second. But, the immigration thing was another thing, a failed policy of theirs, and it looks like they're going to cut that department by 3,300 jobs over the next three years. A lot of the institutions in in Canada now hurting because they had built their models around this open immigration policy.
Yeah, well, they've also Statistics Canada. I haven't got around to writing a story about it yet, but they released a new projection for the what they think the population of Canada is going to be in several decades, and they've brought that right down by several million people now. That estimate, or they call it a projection. I think they don't want to use the word prediction, but I mean that's factoring in this pretty minor change really to immigration policy, but it just shows how dramatic an effect these policies can have and have had. And another thing with this immigration department cutting jobs that I think is quite interesting is they doubled their workforce in a space of 10 years at this particular federal department. And as we know, because we've looked at the other stats, that's replicated across the federal government, where they've really boosted their workforces.
And that's where the growth
And
is, public sector.
absolutely, yeah. And some have argued, and will continue to argue that it was at the expense of the private sector and the more productive side of the economy. So I feel like this is also a recognition of that. That there has been this huge boost in hiring in the public sector, and anybody that knows anything about economics knows that that can't be sustained indefinitely. Eventually, that has to stop. So it could be a sign of that as well.
Donald Trump, busy on his first day in office there, signing a whole bunch of executive orders. He did give Canada a reprieve by pushing that back to February 1st. But like some of the orders that he signed are executive orders. They've left the WHO. And the DEI programs are scrapped. They've said there's only 2 genders. They pardoned all the January 6th. Not all, I should say, pardoned a bunch of people for the January 6th. CBC had reported that they pardoned on their tweet 15,000 was actually 1,500. And then they've also left the Paris Accord. So a lot of leaving stuff.
Yeah, well, the World Health Organization is a huge one because they provide a hell of a lot of funding to that
$500 million according to Donald Trump. And he said that China only funds 39 million, and then they offered him the deal for 39 million, and then Biden paid the 500 million, and then he didn't say that he wouldn't go back to it. He just said that he's not paying 500 million. So
yeah, I mean it was astonishing yesterday to see him. He was on stage. He signed some of these orders, but I think the more interesting one was when he actually said that about February 1st to put the tariff on Canada. He was there in the Oval Office, and he was sat there at the big desk, and it was I've never seen anything like that before. It was astonishing, really. It's almost like a film. It's worth checking out if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, and then the one thing he did ask one of the reporters, Peter Ducey from Fox, he did say, because this has been a complaint of the news outlets, is like access to Biden and Harris. They rarely did press conferences. They just put out Karine Jean-Pierre, but here he is in his first day signing things, and the press are asking questions almost on each one of the executive orders he's signing. And they asked Peter Ducey how many times that Biden did this, and Ducey said 0.
Well, if we're going to cut through the noise and just be honest, Biden couldn't do that. I don't think. I mean, it's not just that he chose not to. I don't think he could do that. And it's also important to note that Trump had basically been on camera and working and giving speeches and whatnot for like 15 hours or something at that point, and he was still kind of going strong. He's got a hell of a sort of engine, hasn't he?
I guess you could also say that's his business. I mean, he's been on television. He's he definitely knows how to speak to a crowd and reporters and all that too. The reporters in the room seemed very cordial. The media outside of that, not so cordial. You have, even what the attack that they did on Elon Musk, exhibiting some energy there on the stage, and said, "My heart goes out to you," and then he kind of like pumped his chest and then raised his hand, and the left-leaning media basically went after him and called him a Nazi, and that's all over the internet. And then I think the ADL came out and said that's absolutely not true. And Elon Musk is a big friend of the Jewish community, so It's disingenuous. It is really sad that's what they would do. And they went after the people on stage too as an oligarchy. Now like those are the same people that they relied on when Biden was in power, when they were all toeing the line for the Democratic Party and censoring people. Now that they won't censor people, now they're the bad people, right?
Yeah, well, the thing about this that struck me the most is, people are being so glib and unserious, I think, because if you accuse somebody of a Nazi salute, performing a Nazi salute, that's a salute associated with probably the most evil, destructive, menacing organization, or whatever you want to call it, in the history of Earth.
Well,
The
that's why they do
worst
it.
thing ever. Are they actually willing to follow through with what they're accusing him of and saying, okay, yeah, he must like that then. He must like genocide and the Holocaust. Because if you're not willing to go all in, then don't be glib, don't be stupid, and don't accuse him of something unless you're willing to actually put all your chips on the table and say, I think this guy liked the Holocaust.
As a journalist, like when you make that accusation, doesn't it like you need to ask that question of him to allow him to defend himself, no? But all these outlets that just went to town on this.
Yeah, well, I mean, the online, particularly the online industry, news industry now, it's just not. Doesn't really look a lot like journalism. It doesn't look like what people might think journalism is like. But I'm sure they'll have sent an email to Elon Musk's PR department or whatever. He's probably got an agent or something like that, and they'll have sent an email to that, obviously knowing he won't respond. And then they can put in the article something along the lines of, "We've requested comment and haven't heard from him yet."
This is like you
But he
said.
has commented, hasn't he? And he said that obviously it's ludicrous.
This is one of the most hated and notorious eras of our time, Nazi Germany. And just to attach that to him is just trying to attach a bunch of hate and fire up. They say the base, like that's what the right always does, the base and the conspiracy theories. What is this if not a conspiracy and firing up your base? Because who else believes this?
It is a conspiracy theory, most certainly, yeah. And there are many about Elon Musk and the idea that this guy that documents absolutely every aspect of his life and just refuses to shut up, constantly speaks and tells people what he thinks, that somehow he's also secretly hiding the fact that he worships Adolf Hitler. I mean, all you can call that is a conspiracy theory.
And if one thing we know about Elon Musk, he's not too scared to admit whatever he believes, right? You know what I mean? If he was a Nazi, he would have said that already. You know what I mean?
Indeed. And also, I feel like saying, like, almost, it might as well be zero people on Earth like Adolf Hitler or like dream about the Nazis. Yeah. It's such a small number of people because the Nazis were an extraordinarily strange set of people from a specific era in history, in a specific country, specific culture. Yeah. It's like there's a certain amount of like trolling and ironic sort of like references to Hitler and things like that, but really, basically nobody alive now has any sort of respect for Adolf Hitler. But still, here we are talking about Adolf Hitler, this guy that's been dead for 60, 70 years or whatever it is.
Well, we did have one Nazi in Parliament there, invited by the Liberals.
Well, even he, isn't going to be a Nazi, is he? Really? Even he like fought in a sort of what was it? He fought in some sort of SS battalion or something, didn't he? Like even people like that haven't got any time for Hitler. So that's kind of it just emphasizes it, really, doesn't it?
And then Trudeau threatens dollar for dollar reprisals against the United States. I did watch that clip of Justin Trudeau. So maybe we can come to that in a bit here. But Pierre Poilievre, you said, just did an announcement too. He wants Parliament back in.
Yeah, and he's saying that. Well, he's made quite a good point, Poilievre, which is that all these big announcements that are being made, like this one, dollar for dollar, which I find funny because we don't have as many dollars as they do, so we can't go dollar for dollar. But anyway, he's saying that this needs parliamentary supervision, which is correct, and also things like the new border cash, $1 billion, more than $1 billion that's been promised for the border, that also needs parliamentary scrutiny. The budget must be scrutinized by the MPs. That's kind of the whole point.
Yeah, I know there was a Liberal MP that came out and says, yeah, we should get Parliament back in, but that everybody has to agree that we won't have a vote of no confidence, that we need to put Canada first. Just like, what? Again, a mirror would be helpful.
Yeah, and we're hearing that a lot, aren't we? That's coming from a lot of corners. That's not just like a partisan point at this point.
Alexa's behind the screen there. She's ahead of us here, but that's okay. Go back. You're good. The Liberals have said many, many times Canadians don't want an election. Well, this poll says they do.
Yeah, well, I mean, that seems, if you follow the polls, that seems to have been pretty much established for a long time now.
Yeah.
That people have wanted an election, and certainly people have wanted rid of Justin Trudeau, including Liberal Party supporters for quite a while as well.
And he still won't go away. He's just hanging on for the last couple of weeks, just like that.
Yeah, and strangely, it's this period now where he's said he's going to resign and he's kind of hanging on. This obviously this will have to be determined in the future when retrospectively. But you could argue quite easily that this is the most important period of his entire time as Prime Minister, right now, when he kind of should be gone, and he said he's going to go.
Kind of a lame duck. Chrystia Freeland, again, we talked about this, flip-flopping on the carbon tax, flip-flopping on a few things, basically saying, Justin Trudeau in this interview that we were going to play, saying that Justin Trudeau fired her, said that you read the budget on Monday and then you're fired after the budget. That's when she resigned. So she was fired.
Yeah. And, well, certainly from her perspective, I guess the Trudeau team would maybe push back on that. But she said it was a very, very strange interview because she was actually asked, what's different about you? How would you be a different Prime Minister from Trudeau? And then she used that as an example. She said, I wouldn't fire my finance minister a few days before she was due to deliver a speech, a financial statement. But it's kind of, that isn't an answer to that question, really, is it? I mean, and that's so feeble that it makes you think, so everything else is the same then? You would do everything Trudeau did, except you would be a bit more tactful in the way that you fire your subordinates.
She said the same thing about in her resignation letter about the GST called it a political gimmick. But she was one promoting it while they were putting it out there.
Yeah, like literally days earlier, she'd been smiling and joyous, hadn't she? And I think it was in Toronto where they were talking about how great it was.
And then Justin Trudeau here asked whether these tariffs would actually be disastrous for Canadians. And he just does not have a good answer. Again, he doesn't have the confidence of his own party, and never mind the confidence of the rest of Canada and the other parties. They need to go back to Parliament and get an election going.
Yeah, I'd say that looks a bit more likely now than it did a couple of weeks ago when he actually prorogued Parliament. It does, as the seriousness of these tariffs or potential tariffs becomes obvious, and then that court decision as well, I think the pressure is starting to build on the Liberals to, at least hurry it up and just fast forward the date and pick who you're going to pick, like at the beginning of February or something like that, rather than wait till March.
They've tried their typical MO was to find an enemy for somebody to focus on, and they picked Danielle Smith as the villain and said that she's the one not playing ball, she's the problem, she's not being a we got to remember that Trudeau's vision of Canada is a post-nationalist state. And here's Danielle Smith that ran on a mandate and got elected on a mandate of Alberta First, and she's doing what she said she was going to do. Donald Trump ran on a mandate of America First, doing what he promised to do, putting America first. When can you say that the Liberal government and Justin Trudeau and his team have put Canada first? Especially after he says it's a post-national state.
Well, I certainly couldn't say it, but They might say that in some sort of abstract roundabout way. They might say, by being an internationalist, we actually strengthen Canada's position in the world because more people respect us and more people sign up to the rules-based order and that kind of thing.
Well, you look at the polls around the world, and that's not the case either. Like Canada is like for the most part a laughingstock in many corners of the world.
Well, I think that ideology, that idea of the world, of like that happy internationalist UN, concept of the world, that is what's being laughed at as well. I mean, the Liberal government and Trudeau they're just blips, aren't they, in the grand scheme of things? But that idea was real for a little while, but now people laugh at it, and I think that's true. I mean, China and India, the two sort of biggest countries in the world, completely laugh at that. They have no time for that whatsoever. Russia, obviously, has never really signed up to it. The only people that are still on board now are some members of the European Union and Canada, basically.
So when you're hiring somebody, I did talk this with I did a show with Renee Merrifield this morning on Beyond the Ballot. One of the questions, if you're hiring somebody or they're running for the job of CEO, and they're running for the job of CEO of Canada, should you check out references from previous jobs? And then that brings me to the point of Mark Carney, who is running for the job, and it looks like a lot of the Liberal and the money is being pushed behind Mark Carney. But the UK, the former UK Prime Minister, we probably have seen this interview, not very flattering of what he did to Britain.
Are you referring to Liz Truss there?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I would say, yeah. I mean, that's a common. You hear that a lot, and we've spoken about that, haven't we, in recent days? That she is expressing quite a sort of a common view of Carney, but she also is very bitter against a lot of financial institutions and the Bank of England because of the nature of her very short premiership when she was.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
the
she
markets
said
turned
the
against
carbon
her.
tax the carbon tax has decimated the British economy.
The what, sorry?
That it ruined the economy in Britain.
What did Carney's policies at the Bank of England? You mean?
Correct.
Well, certainly some people say that it inflated an asset bubble. Because there was a lot of bond buying, quantitative easing, as the financial dorks like to call it. Yeah, and that's been blamed. That's from left and right, though, I should say. It's not just the right. Liz Truss is supposed to represent the right. She's a liberal, really, but the left as well, and under like Jeremy Corbyn and a lot of people in Jeremy Corbyn's camp back in the day, they were very, very hostile at the Bank of England under Carney, and they said that the policies that they pursued were very destructive to living standards.
And then Trump's calling for the reinstatement of the Keystone pipeline.
Yeah, I wonder if he remembers signing that one.
There you go. Danielle Smith down there working it for Alberta and hopefully Canada. A lot of people calling her to be the next Prime Minister of Canada after maybe, Pierre's running for that job right now, but, maybe in the future for Danielle Smith.
Then it would be Canada first, I guess.
There you go.
Alberta second.
Let's shift a little bit of focus to BC. The NDP with another new tax out there for the Airbnbs, right? And this kind of folds into two of the stories that you did. They want, because there's already municipal licensing, and now all of a sudden they want you to license yourself with the province as well, because it says they're going to try and stop illegal Airbnbs. So will illegal Airbnbs sign up? If you're already illegal, why would you sign up for this registry? You know what I mean?
Well, it's also just kind of, this BC government loves a good license, doesn't it? It loves to regulate.
So how many licenses should the Airbnbs have? They got a municipal one, a provincial one. Should there be a federal one as well? Should we have another one?
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe whoever's ancestral land you're squatting on, you should also have to get a license from that First Nation.
This one is the most funny in today's modern world with computers and AI. And once you file all the paperwork that you need to get this license, you got it's a short-term rental business license. So, all these things you need to do. There's a 2 to 5 week waiting period. What?
Yeah,
Okay.
and presumably certain bureaucrats are going to have to be hired to implement that, and they're going to need to be paid and pensioned and all sorts of things like that. So it's just more
So
expense.
the winners in the BC Airbnb policy, and also the drivers of inflation in BC, the highest inflation in Canada, are the hotels. Accommodation up 56.7% in BC in December. A lot of that, related to Taylor Swift, of course. And we talked about that with Renee Merrifield. So hotels win, and consumer loses.
Yeah, and it's like, as usual, it involves Taylor Swift, doesn't it? She's just like at the epicenter of all events in the world, really, isn't she? But yeah, she's kind of her star quality there is going to draw a lot of attention to this. That because of her shows and because there were fewer Airbnbs available, it boosted prices 62% on a month-over-month basis.
They had shows in other parts of Canada where the Airbnb policy was not as bad as it is in BC, and they did not see the hotel increases like that. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it sort of really highlights it, I think, doesn't it? Like it lowers supply, therefore, with ramped up demand, that means you're going to pay more.
And the BC NDP, the reports that they rely on for all these policies are funded by the BC Hotel Association.
Somebody needs to start the BC Airbnb Association.
Well, I did interview the head of Airbnb here in Canada, and he was frustrated with that as well. I said, "Did you get to put your report forward?" And he's like, "Nope." So he said one of the things when I interviewed Brenda Bailey when she was Jobs and Innovation Minister, she said, "Jim, it's all these people that own like 27 of these Airbnbs that are taken away from the rental pool." Well, I asked him that question, and he said, like around 90% of the Airbnbs in Canada are single owner Airbnbs. They have one property. They're not, like all these conglomerates and that, but they make it out like it was these big corporations that you're going after. It turns out they're just small mom and pops, and the real big corporation is providing the reports to the BC government. And I did ask David Eby about that as well, and he said that we have to make the BC Hotel Association BC Hotels stronger because they're building more to think. So definitely, I thought at one point that NDP was all about like the working man and woman.
Yeah, well, on the other hand, what they would retaliate with there, I imagine, if you put that to them, would be something like look at the rents now. Look at the rents in places like Kelowna. They've come down, and they would attribute that to, well, at least in part, to this policy, wouldn't they?
Let's be honest here. That one of the things that Liberals did do well is take the GST off of purpose-built rentals, and we've had a huge amount of rentals being built in Kelowna. And that's what Pierre Poilievre is asking for, to do the same thing for single-family homes, which we have. Like that has been falling, not rising.
Yeah.
BC Finance with Brenda Bailey. She's now got a new gig. She's the finance minister, and then she says their retaliatory tariffs could target Republican red states. Now that's not politicking, right? Instead of just like U.S. Canada thing, she's going to actually pick which. I don't know how they're going to administer that. If the product goes across the border, how they're going to determine like how they're going to add these tariffs. Like, is this something that they dream up? Like, are they like? I know she literally likes these mushroom picking projects that she's funded. Maybe she's taking some of these.
I think she's taking the lead from the Liberal government because they've said that they're looking at that now, but they also did that last time in the first Trump presidency when they targeted exports from Florida and from some of the states in the Midwest that had voted for Trump.
News flash for Brenda Bailey. The United States is a red state. Senate controlled by Republicans, Congress controlled by Republicans, and the White House controlled by Republicans. So it is one red state, the United States.
Yeah. Well, the hope is that they can put pressure on, for example, let's say Florida again, and then as a consequence of that, the Florida senators or the Florida governor or something like that, or business people in Florida would then say, "Look, Mr. Trump, go easy on these Canadians because it's hurting my bottom line," kind of thing. That's the theory, but I feel like Trump is very, very powerful at the moment, isn't he? He's at like the peak of his power, so it's quite a risky strategy because I feel like he's probably powerful enough now to say to this imaginary Floridian, let's say, like just say no, like just get over it, like hold on, and I've got a good idea and I'll make this work, kind of thing.
If I was a business advisor in the room and somebody floated that idea, I would just say no.
Yeah, well, it's also, it hasn't got his attention really, has it? He hasn't even been asked a question about this, never mind speaking about it. There are ways to get his attention, as you know, we've talked about before. Like I think David Eby came the closest to getting his attention when he said that about we're going to potentially block trucks or charge trucks coming through, or lobby for that to happen anyway, coming through to Alaska. But there are things like that where that would get the Americans' attention, but it seems like they're not willing to really say anything serious and scary. Like I said right at the beginning, say something about NORAD, for example, that would freak out the Americans so much. But they're not willing to do that. It's like they're still kind of treading softly, I think.
Yeah. You put this one in here. Everyone in Germany and Europe can freely express their opinions, even billionaires, but they don't accept support for right-wing extremist positions.
Yeah, it's a shame we can't play this because it's like, and he says it in English, and he's got one of those, German accents that we love so much. But I just think it's kind of, sometimes I pity the Europeans and particularly the Germans. I have, if there's any Germans listening to this, they're gonna hate this, obviously. But I almost pity them because it's like they don't quite get it. They don't quite understand what it is to have a pluralistic liberal society, which is the invention of the English. The English invented that and then sent it off to Canada and the US and other places. But the Germans, I just feel like they don't get it, and they never have. It's only been a democracy for a relatively short period of time anyway. And obviously they had this god-awful trauma with Hitler and the Nazis. So it becomes perfectly natural for the leader of Germany to say something as obviously stupid as that. Whereas it's like, you can have free speech, but you can't support right-wing positions. It's just like, it's transparent and that
is kind of been what the liberals and the Democrats have been on both sides of this border, right? Like you're allowed to have an opinion as long as it's the opinion that they're supporting at this point.
Yeah, and that is that there's been a lot of ink spilled on this, but that's fundamentally like a European idea. What like a pretentious person would probably call like a French idea. But it's like this idea of the center, the political center, the command center deciding what's okay, and it's like
the approved
things
ideas
are done for the good of the state.
Yeah, the approved ideas. You have freedom of speech, kind of like Henry Ford in the black car, right? You can have any color you want as long as it's black, and you can express your opinion as long as it's this one.
Yeah, you can have any opinion as long as it's liberal.
Yeah, so there you go. Let's move on to markets. Gold up this morning, 27.42. Again, bouncing in that range. Again, Bitcoin too now, above that $100,000 mark. Around $105,000. You can go to the Bitcoin chart there, Alexa. There you go. Look at that, eh? And the markets, this is, the markets are up fairly strong this morning. The Dow's up 467 points, NASDAQ up, everything is kind of up, right? So, again, that's what we expected with this thing. And then the Canadian dollar did bounce on a little bit on, like the relief from the tariffs. And then, obviously, now they're saying the tariffs may come just, a few days later. I know Kevin O'Leary was trying to ask for time for the election, and maybe we'll get a reprieve if they can ask. I think if we ask nicely and say, hey, look, we're going to have an election. Can you give us some time to sort things out and have the right people negotiating with a clear mandate? That might be the better way to ask for this instead of just starting to throw darts across the border, like, especially in the position we're in. We're not in a position of strength.
That would then give the Liberals their campaign their entire campaign, wouldn't it? It would be Pierre Poilievre is a sort of fifth columnist. He's doing business with Trump, and they've rigged this whole deal so that he can win and then give Trump a good deal. Whereas we're the liberals and we're going to defend our precious maple syrup.
I don't know if anybody's going to believe them at this point, especially when they're flip-flopping on everything. Right?
I'm not saying they would, but I think that would inevitably be their campaign then at that point.
Well, they've just tried this Team Canada thing, and I just listened to Vasi Kapelis from CTV, a great journalist, was out there, talking to Jagmeet Singh and talking about like how he voted against the pipelines to go to the east numerous times, and does he regret that? And of course, he's just like, let's not talk about the past, let's talk about the future. Minerals and all these things. I'm just like, he will not take responsibility for some of the actions that they've taken in the past.
Yeah. Well, and also, it's not just the NDP. Karina Gould, one of the, considered to be one of the front runners to be the Liberal leader, she's also got that infamous tweet lying around still, hasn't she, where she said, let's figure out a way to landlock Alberta.
Yeah.
Landlock Alberta's oil, sorry.
Yeah. No, I know, that's what I mean. Like they've tried nothing but to suppress Alberta. And now all of a sudden they're mad at Alberta because Alberta won't play Team Canada with them. Their version of Team Canada, by the way, not because if they were really playing Team Canada, they would call an election. They would put Canada first and not themselves first. That's the question I would resort back to anybody that says, oh, everybody's got to play Team Canada, then call an election.
Or even, one step back and say, don't prorogue Parliament at possibly the most intense moment in the last sort of 50 years of Canadian history or something like that. Don't do something as crazy as prorogue Parliament.
I think just exchange that word prorogue, as crazy as with as selfish as.
Well, yeah, and after the election, if the polls are accurate, and we've said that a lot of times, and the Liberals lose, that is going to be put as number one, really, is that one of the reasons that they've been rejected, is that they were perceived to have been more interested in themselves than the Canadian good.
Yeah, I agree. In the EV, we don't have much in the EV section today other than this is the big one, though. But Trump just dumped the EV mandate, and I'm sure a lot of the legacy automakers in the United States breathed a sigh of relief. And I can't see our EV mandate sticking as well because that would be a tough time if Ford on this side of the border, they would just stop producing cars on this side of the border. And that would be the end of manufacturing. Even the 1.7% of the manufacturing we still have, with Ford and different other legacy automakers in Ontario. Why would they, if there's an EV mandate in Canada and none in the United States, why would Ford keep that plant open?
Yeah, it would be absolutely impossible, wouldn't it?
So this EV dump of the mandate is basically going to be mirrored here because there's not much choice. Otherwise, you would just say goodbye to that Ford plant. And I'm just using Ford. There's other plants, but I'm just saying, I can tell you right now, Ford would just shift their manufacturing to the States.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good example to refer to because that applies to lots of sections of the economy and also beyond the economy, doesn't it? That's how closely related the US and Canada actually are. Yeah. So if you imagine Mark Carney, for example, who's come out really hard against the US and is obviously a liberal and he's signed up to a lot of liberal policies. Imagine he won the next election, just for argument's sake. Yeah. You would be in real trouble then, wouldn't you? Because you would have these two very, very diverging governments that didn't agree on any of the basics.
Yes, because the past, 10 years, Mark Carney has been really the puppet master for Justin Trudeau. He's been an advisor, and he's been working for Brookfield Asset Management and a bunch of other things. They're all on climate stuff, right? Everything related to climate. And, all he sees Greta Thunberg as one of his idols. And Trump just nixed the Green New Deal. So that's the end of it in the States. And so how does Canadian manufacturing compete with that now? If all of a sudden, we're saying we got to have EV mandates here and not there.
Yeah, but it's also, this is going to go all across the board, isn't it? It's going to be things like the cost of energy as well, which is something that nations compete with each other when it comes to attracting industry. If Canada, like Ontario, let's say, where there's an awful lot of industry, if in Ontario they pursue green energy on a grand scale and they subsidize it and all the rest of it in line with Trudeau's vision, then energy is going to be considerably more expensive on that side of the border, isn't it? And then you lose that advantage too. And it's kind of, you've always got to think about your main competitor in that way, haven't you?
And if we look at the actions again, look at the actions, and we know that Canada's big asset, and even the Liberals and the NDP are seeing it now, remarkably. It's our natural resources. And if you look at the actions of Donald Trump, Keystone Pipeline. So you know he wants our oil and gas. He wants it. He needs it.
Totally. Well, I mean, you
Right?
just have to look at where they get their oil from on any given day. Like quite a lot of it comes from Alberta. They are
Same thing as
relying
electricity.
on it for
Same
now.
thing. That's our negotiating strength, and that's where we need to stick to, right? Like, and we need to talk about how we can. But we've been suppressing those. And if we want to look for blame, I think as Canadians, we can look in the mirror. We have to accept responsibility. We put ourselves here by not diversifying away from just one main customer. We rely so heavily in the United States when the Europeans were begging for our oil and gas and LNG and all that stuff. And we said no, because we're not promoting oil and gas and LNG. We would sell them hydrogen, which we don't make yet, but we will in a few years. We'll give them hydrogen, which is, for most people say is a failed technology, really. Like, it's just not economic. It costs more to make it than what you get out of it. It's just another way to suppress our natural resources.
And that was hydrogen that was created using wind turbines, wasn't it? Which is, some people consider that a bit of a madcap idea.
That's what I mean. Like, you know what I mean? It's just saying, hey, we're going to sell you some magic beans. They're coming later, but we don't have anything for you right now. But, don't, all that stuff other stuff we have, we don't want to sell that stuff, right?
But like you said, how telling it is now to look at the political landscape and see everybody unanimously talking about Canada's real resources, like the real deal, not wind turbines and hydrogen, but oil and gas and minerals.
They must have been watching our show for the past couple of months, because that's what we've been talking about. Now all of a sudden they picked up on it.
Or maybe, if you want to be a bit less generous, maybe they knew all along where Canada's actual hard power resided, but they pretended for 10 years at least that was actually an embarrassing thing, and that we didn't have to focus on that.
But look who's been working in the background for Trudeau is Mark Carney, and how did he make his money? He's been making it off climate change.
Yeah, well, and a lot of other sort of very internationally facing schemes, various kinds.
If you look at Brookfield Asset Management, that the company he chaired, they've been also accused of fudging their climate credits too, their carbon credits, by a lot.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, and many companies have done that, haven't they? Because I think, deep down, it's not really a secret, is it? Like, deep down, they resent all this, all of the green stuff.
The last thing on Carney there, that net zero alliance that he also chaired, which had all the big banks, BlackRock, JP Morgan, and all these things have all left, and including now 4 of the Canadian banks have left. So that thing's collapsed as well. So maybe he just needs a job.
Yeah, he needs to do something in his retirement.
There you go. And then we've got our meme. I don't know if it's a meme or not, but it's kind of interesting for sure. Andrew Scheer put this out. The CBC demanding the taxpayer subsidy be increased by nearly 50% because they can't sell ads. Because they can't sell ads because nobody wants to watch.
Yeah. Well, they've got to get that money somehow, haven't they?
Should we demand something? Is that how you do it? You just demand it? Is that how you get it?
Maybe.
Just demand it. Because we get 0. And they get a lot more.
It's worth a try, isn't it? Maybe we should make that demand.
$2 billion. They're, and they still can't make a go of it.
Yeah, I'm just saying here, you said last word on Mark Carney, but this can now be the last word on Mark Carney. Guilbeault has endorsed Mark Carney as of this morning.
Imagine that. Imagine that.
That's probably not one that you probably don't want that, do you? You probably don't want that endorsement.
Well, like I said, Mark Carney is like, if you think about like the kingpin, I think that Justin Trudeau, they've been taking advice from him for how long? And they're all kind of like interrelated. Even Carney is the godfather for Chrystia Freeland's um, child. It's odd that is she being used, just again being used to kind of like look like they're actually having a leadership race.
Well, I don't know about attributing that level of dastardliness to them, but I mean, it certainly seems that all the big names, just about all of the big names, are lining up behind Carney, aren't they?
But
Very few on
because
Freeland's side.
if you pick a leader, coordinate a leader like right away, like Carney, if you just decide that it's Carney, who's never got a single Canadian vote, then what would it be the need to prorogue government, right? So unless you had a real leadership race. So are they actually having a real leadership race, or are they just getting time so that Carney can trot out some policies and travel across the country and try to convince people that he's the solution?
I'm sure there'll be a lot of people making that claim. Well, actually, Renee Merrifield said something similar, didn't she, last week?
Yeah, because you know what I mean. Like, it doesn't look like Chrystia Freeland has much of a chance, and Karina Gold would even have less of a chance. And they seem to be like everybody seems to be lining up behind Mark Carney. So then, what is the purpose of proroguing government then? They already know who the leader is going to be.
Well, I suppose that would have looked bad, and that would have been a bad beginning for Mark Carney if he was just kind of ushered into the office without any sort of votes being cast.
And this isn't like he actually is not an MP. He has never got a single Canadian vote, and he's running for the Prime Minister's job.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't look all that good, I would say. Yeah.
But I mean, and would you put it past the Liberals from doing something that is like not in the best interest of Canadians by proroguing government to give Mark Carney just some time to travel across Canada, shake some hands, and see if he can line up some support? And meanwhile, Chrystia Freeland is just thrown to the wolves.
Yeah, well, it's really starting to seem a bit weird now when you've got kind of like Danielle Smith. She's almost like one prime minister. Then you got Doug Ford. Then you've got Trudeau occasionally pops up. Now you've got Mark Carney issuing, as he did yesterday, issuing statements about the problem of the day. So he issued a statement yesterday from his media department.
He's already
to
acting
talk about the tariffs.
Yeah, he's acting like the prime minister. That's what I mean. I think Trudeau's game here is to buy time for Carney to travel around and shake some hands. And they've been on the blower with the NDP and the Bloc to see if they can buy till October.
Although Singh did say, I think it was yesterday, Singh came out and said he's still going to vote against the Liberals.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's the part that's driving them crazy, probably, because they can't find enough shekels to kind of like bribe Jagmeet anymore, right?
Yeah, but I mean, well, the point that I was trying to make earlier is like power is very widely spread now, isn't it? It's very diffused, and that is tragic when you have all the power in the world focused in one person in the US there, and he's gunning for us. And here we are with scattered leaders who have got very different priorities. Like Mark Carney's number one priority, regardless of what he would say, has to be to win the leadership election, the Liberal leadership election. It's not necessarily Canada at this moment in time, is it? So it's kind of, and then you've got Danielle Smith. Obviously, her priority is Alberta, and she's been attacked a lot for that. But why are we in the situation where Danielle Smith feels that she has to make a noise? It's because she doesn't think that the federal government is doing enough.
Yeah. We have to accept responsibility for where we are and what the policy we've had in place, that we are so reliant on one customer. Basically, if you had a company relying so heavily on one customer, and that customer turns out to be hostile towards you, it's you have to take some responsibility for that.
Yeah, and to be honest, that line of thinking, when you follow that far enough, that's what makes me wonder, like, what on earth Donald Trump is hoping to achieve here, because it's already such a good deal for the Americans. Yeah. They already have like a monopoly on Alberta's oil, just about, and they get it cheap, and we don't even refine it here. It's like they get everything that they want, really, don't they?
I think he's just taking advantage of a very weak situation in Canada. and he's trying to get the best deal he can. And that's, I mean, I guess from his defense, it would be America first. And yeah, we're weak, and so he's negotiating with the weakness. And we need, again, we need strong leadership, and we need an election, and we need a strong mandate, and we need, like a strong voice that advocates and puts Canada first.
Yeah. Well, let's see if that's going to happen. Almost the only thing that could be worse than what we have now is another minority government. So I think you're right to say it needs to be a strong mandate. That's like a priority, isn't it? It's pretty urgent.
Yeah. With that said, we do thank you for watching Kelowna Now.